They call him Nerd. Then he hacked their group chat and exposed everything. Marcus Whitfield adjusted his thick-rimmed glasses for the 100th time that morning as he navigated the crowded hallways of Westbridge High School. At 17, he was the kind of student who seemed to fade into the background. Average height, thin frame, pale skin that rarely saw sunlight, and an oversized backpack stuffed with computer programming textbooks that weighed almost as much as he did. His dark hair fell messily across his forehead, and his clothes were always slightly too big, hand-me-downs from his older brother, who had graduated 3 years ago. What nobody at Westbridge knew was that Marcus had been coding since he was 8 years old. By 12, he was already freelancing for small tech companies under a pseudonym. By 15, he had developed 3 mobile apps that generated enough passive income to pay for his family's mortgage. And now, at 17, he was one of the most skilled hackers in the underground cybersecurity community, known only by his handle Ghostbite. But none of that mattered within these walls. Here, he was just the weird kid who ate lunch alone. The ringleader of his torment was Blake Morrison, a 6-foot-tall senior with the kind of athletic build that came from years of football training and a personality that screamed entitlement. Blake had sandy blonde hair that he constantly ran his fingers through, piercing blue eyes that seemed to scan for weakness, and a smile that never reached those eyes. His followers were equally predictable. Tyler Brooks, a stocky kid with anger issues who served as Blake's muscle, and Jessica Hartwell, a cheerleader whose cruelty was wrapped in designer clothes and perfect makeup. Westbridge High School was one of those sprawling suburban institutions that tried too hard to appear modern and progressive. The main building was all glass and steel, with inspirational quotes painted on the walls about embracing diversity and fostering growth. The reality was quite different. The administration turned a blind eye to the social hierarchies that governed student life, and teachers were too overwhelmed to notice when certain students were systematically targeted. Marcus had been attending Westbridge for 3 years now, ever since his family moved to the district. The bullying had started almost immediately. It began with small things: his lunch money going missing, his locker being stuffed with garbage, Snickers when he walked by. But over the months, it had escalated into something much worse. The cafeteria was where it usually happened. Marcus would sit at his usual table in the far corner, trying to eat his sandwich while scrolling through coding forums on his phone. That's when Blake and his crew would make their approach. "Well, well, well," Blake's voice carried across the cafeteria as he sauntered over with Tyler and Jessica flanking him. "Look what we have here. It's our favorite little nerd." Marcus kept his eyes on his phone, hoping they would lose interest and move on. "Just ignore them," he told himself. "They'll get bored." But Blake wasn't in a mood to be ignored today. He reached across the table and snatched Marcus's phone, holding it up to examine the screen. "What's this? Some kind of computer code? God, you're even more pathetic than I thought." "Please just give it back," Marcus said quietly, finally looking up. His voice was barely above a whisper. Jessica laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh my God, did you hear that?" he said. "Please. That's so cute." Tyler cracked his knuckles. "Maybe we should teach him some manners." Blake tossed the phone back onto the table, but not before accidentally knocking over Marcus's water bottle. The liquid spilled across the table and soaked into Marcus's textbooks. "Oops," Blake said with mock concern. "How clumsy of me." Marcus watched his programming notes become illegible as the water seeped through the pages. These weren't just any notes. They contained months of work on a security protocol he'd been developing. "Breathe," he told himself. "Just breathe." "You know what I don't understand," Blake continued, sliding into the seat across from Marcus uninvited, "is why someone like you even bothers coming to school. I mean, what's the point? You're never going to amount to anything anyway." The words stung because they echoed Marcus's own fears. Despite his technical abilities, he struggled with social interactions. He'd never had a girlfriend, barely had any friends, and spent most of his free time alone in his room coding. Sometimes he wondered if Blake was right, if technical skills meant nothing without the confidence to use them in the real world. "I bet you've never even kissed a girl," Jessica added, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Have you, Marcus? Have you ever even talked to a girl who wasn't your mom?" Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment. The truth was, he'd had crushes on several girls at school, but he'd never worked up the courage to talk to any of them. His social anxiety was crippling, made worse by years of being told he wasn't worth anyone's time. "Leave me alone," he said, gathering his soggy textbooks and preparing to leave. But Tyler stepped into his path, blocking his exit. "Where do you think you're going, nerd? We're not done talking to you." I have to get to class," Marcus stammered. Blake stood up slowly, deliberately. "See, that's your problem, Marcus. You think you can just walk away from us. But here's the thing. We own this school, and that means we own you." The incident in the cafeteria became a daily ritual. Blake and his friends would find Marcus during lunch, humiliate him in front of the other students, and then let him go just before the period ended. The other students would watch with a mixture of amusement and relief that they weren't the ones being targeted. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly cafeteria monitor, would occasionally glance in their direction, but never intervened. Later, when Marcus tried to report the bullying to his guidance counselor, Mr. Henderson, he was told that boys will be boys and that he needed to learn to stand up for himself. If only they knew, Marcus thought bitterly as he walked home that afternoon. His backpack was lighter now. Blake had thrown his programming textbook in the trash, claiming it was doing everyone a favor. "If only they knew what I could do." The truth was, Marcus didn't fight back because he was afraid of what might happen if he unleashed his real abilities. He'd been raised by parents who valued kindness and restraint. His father, a quiet accountant, had always taught him that violence never solved anything. His mother, a part-time librarian, emphasized the importance of taking the high road. But more than that, Marcus was terrified of the consequences. He knew that if he retaliated using his hacking skills, he could destroy Blake's life completely. He could access his social media accounts, his email, his bank information, his family's financial records. He could expose every secret, every embarrassing moment, every vulnerable piece of information that Blake had ever put online. The power was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. So instead, Marcus endured. He came to school each day, suffered through the humiliation, and told himself that it would eventually end, that he just had to survive until graduation. But Blake had other plans. The escalation began on a Tuesday in October. Marcus was walking to his locker after gym class when he noticed something was wrong. His combination lock had been cut, hanging uselessly from the metal door. Inside, his locker had been vandalized with permanent marker. The words "loser," "freak," and "virgin" were scrawled across his textbooks and the inside walls. But worse than the vandalism was what was missing. His laptop, the one piece of technology that connected him to the world where he actually mattered, was gone. Marcus's hands shook as he searched through the destroyed contents of his locker. The laptop contained everything: his current projects, his portfolio, his connection to the hacking community where he was respected and valued. Without it, he felt completely powerless. "Looking for something?" Blake's voice came from behind him. Marcus spun around to find Blake leaning against the opposite wall. Marcus's laptop balanced casually in his hands. Tyler and Jessica stood beside him, both grinning like hyenas. "Give it back," Marcus said, his voice stronger than he felt. Blake pretended to consider this. "I don't know. This is a pretty nice computer. I bet it's worth some money." "It's mine," Marcus said desperately. "Please, just give it back." Blake mused, turning the laptop over in his hands. "Tell you what, I'll give it back if you do something for me." Marcus's stomach dropped. "What?" Blake's smile widened. "I want you to get down on your hands and knees and beg for it. Right here, in front of everyone." Students had begun to gather in the hallway, drawn by the commotion. Marcus could see them pulling out their phones, ready to record whatever happened next. The thought of the humiliation going viral made him feel sick. "Come on, Marcus," Jessica said sweetly. "It's just a little begging. You're already pathetic. What's a little more?" Marcus looked around at the crowd of faces, all waiting to see what he would do. He thought about his laptop, about all the work he would lose, about the connections to the only community where he belonged. Then he thought about his parents, about the lessons they'd taught him about dignity and self-respect. "No," he said quietly. Blake's expression darkened. "What did you say?" "I said no." Marcus's voice was barely audible, but it carried through the silent hallway. Blake stepped closer, still holding the laptop. "I don't think you understand the situation here, nerd. You don't get to say no to me." And then, without warning, Blake opened the laptop and slammed it shut on the edge of a nearby locker. The sound of cracking plastic and breaking components echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. Marcus watched in horror as Blake repeated the action, smashing his laptop against the locker again and again until it was nothing but a twisted mess of metal and circuits. 3 years of work, countless hours of coding, his entire digital life, destroyed in seconds. "Oops," Blake said, dropping the ruined laptop at Marcus's feet. "Looks like I'm clumsy again." The crowd dispersed, disappointed that the show was over. A few students stepped around the broken pieces of laptop as they headed to their next classes. Marcus stood there for a long moment, staring at the wreckage of his most prized possession. That night, Marcus sat in his room staring at the broken laptop on his desk. His parents had been sympathetic, but ultimately helpless. They couldn't afford to replace it immediately, and the school claimed they couldn't prove who was responsible for the vandalism. "Enough," Marcus thought. "I've had enough." He pulled out his phone and began typing. Within minutes, he had logged into a secure server using his backup accounts. The underground hacking community he belonged to had strict rules about using their skills for personal vendettas, but Marcus no longer cared about rules. He started with social media. Blake's Instagram account was pathetically easy to breach. His password was literally Blake123. From there, Marcus gained access to his email, his Snapchat, his Twitter, and eventually his text messages. What he found was worse than he had imagined. Blake's phone contained hundreds of messages between him, Tyler, and Jessica, all planning elaborate ways to humiliate not just Marcus, but several other students at Westbridge. They had a group chat called Loser Watch, where they shared photos they'd taken of their victims, often in compromising or embarrassing situations. There were photos of Marcus eating alone, looking miserable, photos of Sarah Chen, a shy sophomore, crying in the bathroom after they'd spread rumors about her, photos of David Martinez, a kid with a stutter, being mocked during a presentation. The cruelty was systematic and documented, but the most damaging material was what Blake thought was private. Screenshots of conversations where he bragged about cheating on tests, about using his father's connections to get into college, about selling stolen prescription drugs to other students, photos of him drinking at parties while underage, vandalizing school property, and worse. Marcus spent the entire night cataloging everything. By morning, he had enough evidence to destroy Blake's life completely. College applications, scholarship opportunities, his reputation, his relationships, everything could be gone with a few keystrokes. The next day at school, Marcus walked through the hallways with a different kind of energy. He still looked the same, thin, awkward, invisible, but something had changed. He carried himself straighter. His eyes held a confidence that hadn't been there before. Blake noticed the change during lunch. "Well, well," he said, approaching Marcus's table with his usual swagger. "Someone looks happy today. Did Mommy buy you a new computer?" Marcus looked up from his phone, a backup device he'd been using while planning his revenge. "Actually, Blake, I wanted to thank you." Blake stopped mid-stride, confused. "Thank me?" "Yes," Marcus said, standing up. For the first time since the bullying began, he met Blake's eyes directly. "You did me a huge favor yesterday." Tyler and Jessica exchanged glances. This wasn't the reaction they were expecting. "See," Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength, "when you destroyed my laptop, you helped me realize something important. I've been playing defense this whole time, but I'm really much better at offense." Blake's confident smile faltered slightly. "What are you talking about, nerd?" Marcus pulled out his phone and began reading from the screen. Tyler Brooks, October 15th, 3:47 a.m. "Dude, I can't believe how easy it was to get those pills from the nurse's office. These idiots will pay $20 each for Adderall." Tyler's face went white. "What the hell?" Marcus continued reading. Jessica Hartwell, October 12th, 11:23 p.m. "I can't wait to see that loser Marcus cry tomorrow. Blake's idea about the laptop is genius. Should we film it?" The cafeteria had gone silent. Students at nearby tables were beginning to pay attention. "Stop," Blake said, his voice losing its usual confidence. But Marcus was just getting started. Blake Morrison, October 8th, 2:15 a.m. "Sarah Chen was crying so hard today after we put those photos of her on Instagram. I almost felt bad. Almost. LMAO. Blake lunged forward, trying to grab Marcus's phone, but Marcus had anticipated this. He stepped back smoothly, still reading. "Oh, and here's my personal favorite," Marcus said, his voice now carrying throughout the entire cafeteria. Blake Morrison, September 30th, 4:32 p.m. "Got the SAT answers from my dad's friend at the testing center. I'm definitely getting into Stanford now. These honest kids are such idiots." The color drained from Blake's face. "How did you get this information?" Marcus finished. "Well, Blake, it turns out that when you use the same password for everything, and that password is Blake123, you're not exactly Fort Knox." Murmurs rippled through the cafeteria. Students were pulling out their phones, recording the confrontation. The tables had turned completely. "You hacked my phone?" Blake's voice was barely a whisper. "I did so much more than that," Marcus said calmly. "I hacked your email, your social media, your cloud storage, your parents' financial records, your college application accounts. Did you know your dad has been embezzling money from his law firm? That's interesting information." Blake's face went from pale to red with anger. "You little freak. I'm going to—" "You're going to what?" Marcus interrupted. "Beat me up? Go ahead. Try it. Because the moment you lay a hand on me, all of this information gets automatically uploaded to every social media platform, every college admissions office, and every local news station in the city." The threat hung in the air like a sword. Blake's hands were clenched into fists, but he couldn't move. Marcus turned to address the crowd that had gathered. "You see, everyone, Blake here has been running a little operation. He and his friends have been systematically targeting students they consider weak and documenting their humiliation. They have a group chat called Loser Watch, where they share photos of crying students and plan new ways to torture people." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several students looked ashamed. They'd been bystanders to the bullying, but hearing it described so clinically made them realize how awful it really was. "But here's what really gets me," Marcus continued, his voice rising with emotion for the first time. "Blake, you called me pathetic. You said I'd never amount to anything. But look at us now. You're standing there, terrified, because a pathetic nerd outsmarted you completely." Blake tried to regain his composure. "You can't prove any of this is real. Anyone can fake text messages." Marcus smiled, a cold, calculating expression that no one at Westbridge had ever seen before. "You're right. Anyone can fake text messages. But can anyone fake bank records? Because I also have documentation of how you've been stealing money from the concession stand during football games. Or academic records? Because I have proof of every test you've cheated on since freshman year." Blake's legs seemed to give out slightly. He leaned against a nearby table for support. "Or," Marcus continued. My personal favorite, video files. You know, Blake, you should be more careful about what you record on your phone. That video of you and your friends vandalizing the freshman parking lot last month? The one where you're clearly visible spray painting that racist graffiti? That's going to be very interesting to the police. The cafeteria was now completely silent except for the sound of phones recording. Even the lunch staff had stopped working to listen. Tyler stepped forward, his usual aggression replaced by panic. Look, man, we can work something out. We're sorry, okay? We'll leave you alone. Marcus turned his attention to Tyler. Oh, Tyler, you think this is about leaving me alone? This stopped being about me the moment I saw those photos of Sarah Chen crying, or David Martinez having a panic attack, or the dozen other students you've been tormenting. He pulled up another screen on his phone. Tyler Brooks, October 5th, 6:23 p.m. That kid with the stutter is so easy to mess with. I made him cry in English class today just by asking him to read out loud. Hilarious. Tyler looked around desperately, but the crowd was no longer on his side. Students who had been his friends were now looking at him with disgust. Jessica, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. Marcus, please, we made mistakes, but destroying our lives won't solve anything. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been pity. Jessica, you made a mistake when you accidentally knocked over someone's books. What you did was systematic cruelty. There's a difference. He showed his phone screen to the crowd. Jessica Hartwell has been particularly creative. She's been taking photos of students in the locker room and sharing them in group chats to mock their bodies. She's also been spreading rumors about students' sexuality and family situations based on information she gathered by pretending to be their friend. Jessica's face crumpled. That's not... I never meant... You never meant for it to have consequences, Marcus corrected. But you absolutely meant to hurt people. That was the entire point. The crowd was growing larger. Teachers were beginning to notice the commotion, but they couldn't push through the dense circle of students. Marcus raised his voice to address everyone. I want all of you to understand something. For 3 years, I've watched Blake and his friends destroy people's self-esteem, ruin their high school experience, and make them feel worthless. And all of you watched it happen too. You laughed, you recorded it, you shared it, or you just pretended not to see it. The accusation hit home. Several students looked down at their feet, ashamed. But here's what you didn't know, Marcus continued. Every single one of you has left digital footprints. Every social media post, every text message, every email, every search history. It's all there, waiting for someone with the right skills to find it. The implication was clear, and a few students began backing away from the crowd. I'm not saying this to threaten you, Marcus clarified. I'm saying it to help you understand something important. The power you thought Blake had over people? That was nothing compared to the power that actually exists in our world. Real power comes from knowledge, from skills, from understanding how things actually work. Blake, who had been silent for several minutes, finally found his voice. What do you want from us? Marcus considered this. The rage that had been building inside him for months was finally beginning to subside, replaced by something calmer, but more determined. First, he said, you're going to apologize. Not to me. I'm past needing your apologies. You're going to apologize to every single student you've targeted. You're going to find Sarah Chen and David Martinez and everyone else, and you're going to genuinely apologize for what you did. Blake nodded quickly. Okay, yes, we can do that. Second, Marcus continued, you're going to delete every single photo, video, and message from your Loser Watch group chat. And you're going to provide me with proof that it's been deleted. Done, Tyler said immediately. Third, Marcus said, his voice hardening again, you're going to turn yourselves into the administration for the cheating, the theft, the vandalism, and everything else. You're going to face the consequences of your actions like adults. Blake's face fell. But that'll ruin our college applications, our futures. Marcus stared at him for a long moment. You know what, Blake? You're absolutely right. It probably will ruin your futures. But here's the thing. You've been ruining other people's present for years. At least you had a choice in your actions. The weight of the situation was finally sinking in for all three bullies. Their reign of terror was over, and the consequences were going to be severe. But Marcus wasn't finished. However, he said, and Blake looked up with a glimmer of hope, I'm not like you. I don't enjoy destroying people for the sake of it. He pulled up a new screen on his phone. I've created a program that will automatically release all of this information if certain conditions are met. If any student at this school is bullied by any of you ever again, everything goes public. If you try to retaliate against me or anyone else, everything goes public. If you don't follow through on your apologies and making amends, everything goes public. The three former bullies exchanged glances, realizing they were trapped in a digital cage of their own making. But, Marcus continued, if you genuinely change your behavior, if you actually become better people, if you use this experience to grow instead of just wallowing in self-pity, then maybe this information stays private. The crowd was hanging on every word. Some students were recording, others were texting frantically, and still others were just staring in amazement at the transformation they were witnessing. You have a choice, Marcus told Blake. You can learn from this and become someone worth respecting, or you can continue being the same person you've always been and face the consequences. But understand this, you will never, ever have power over another student again. That ends today. Blake looked around at the crowd of students, many of whom were his former friends, and saw only judgment and disappointment. His social empire had crumbled in the span of 15 minutes. Blake started, then stopped. He seemed to be struggling with something internal. Finally, he looked directly at Marcus. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry for what I did to you, and to everyone else. Marcus studied Blake's face, looking for signs of deception. What he saw instead was something he'd never seen before. Genuine remorse mixed with fear and humiliation. Apologies are a start, Marcus said, but they're just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Westbridge High School transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Blake, Tyler, and Jessica had indeed confessed to the administration about their activities. Blake was suspended for 2 weeks and faced academic probation. Tyler was removed from the football team and required to attend anger management counseling. Jessica lost her position as head cheerleader and was assigned to community service. But more importantly, the culture of the school began to change. Students who had previously been bystanders started speaking up when they witnessed bullying. Teachers, embarrassed by how long the situation had gone unaddressed, implemented new policies and training programs. Marcus found himself in an entirely new social position. Students who had never spoken to him before were now approaching him with a mixture of respect and wariness. Some wanted to be his friend, others wanted his help with their own bullying situations, and a few even asked him to teach them about computers and coding. You know, said David Martinez, the boy with the stutter who had been one of Blake's frequent targets, I never thought I'd see the day when Blake Morrison was afraid of anyone. Marcus and David were sitting in the computer lab after school, working on a programming project together. It turned out that David had always been interested in coding but had been too intimidated to join any of the computer clubs. The thing is, Marcus replied, he was never really powerful to begin with. None of them were. They just convinced everyone, including themselves, that they were. David nodded thoughtfully. So what happens now? I mean, you basically rule the school now, right? Marcus looked uncomfortable with that characterization. I don't want to rule anything. I just want to be able to go to school without being afraid. But you could, David pressed. You could make anyone's life miserable if you wanted to. Marcus considered this. It was true. He now had the technical skills and the reputation to intimidate almost anyone at Westbridge. The temptation was definitely there. After years of being powerless, the idea of having complete control was intoxicating. My parents always taught me that how you treat people when you have power over them shows who you really are, Marcus said finally. I don't want to become what I fought against. A few weeks later, Marcus was walking through the same hallway where Blake had destroyed his laptop when he heard a familiar voice calling his name. Marcus, wait up! He turned to see Blake jogging toward him, alone for once. Marcus tensed, unsure what to expect. I wanted to talk to you, Blake said, slightly out of breath. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. Marcus waited, saying nothing. Blake seemed to struggle with his words. I know you probably don't believe this, but I really am sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because I finally understand how much I hurt people. What changed? Marcus asked. Blake looked down at his feet. I've been going to counseling, like the school required, and my counselor made me write letters to everyone I bullied. Not to send them, just to really think about what I did. When I wrote your letter, I realized that I was doing to you what my older brother used to do to me. This was the first personal information Blake had ever shared with Marcus. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it provided context. That doesn't make it okay, Marcus said. I know, Blake replied quickly. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just trying to understand why I became such a horrible person. They walked in silence for a moment. The thing is, Blake continued, I used to think that being feared was the same as being respected. But watching how people look at you now versus how they looked at me, there's a difference. Marcus considered this. People don't respect me because they're afraid of me, Blake. They respect me because I stood up for myself and for others who couldn't stand up for themselves. Blake nodded. I know, and I'm trying to figure out how to earn that kind of respect instead of just demanding it. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face Blake. Do you know what the hardest part was? It wasn't the humiliation or the fear. It was feeling like I didn't matter. Like I was so insignificant that no one would even notice if I disappeared. Blake's face showed genuine pain. I made you feel that way. You and a lot of other people, Marcus confirmed. But the thing is, I always mattered. I just didn't know it yet. Blake was quiet for a long moment. Is there anything I can do to make it right? Marcus thought about this. You can't undo what you did, but you can make sure it never happens again. And not just that you don't do it, that you stop it when you see others doing it. I will, Blake said with conviction. I promise. As they parted ways, Marcus realized that this conversation had been more healing than he'd expected. Not because Blake deserved forgiveness, but because Marcus deserved to let go of the anger that had been consuming him. The rest of senior year passed more peacefully than Marcus had ever imagined possible. He joined the robotics club, started tutoring other students in programming, and even went to his first school dance. Sarah Chen, who had recovered from her own bullying experience, asked him to be her date. They had a wonderful time, bonding over their shared love of science fiction and their mutual understanding of what it felt like to be an outsider. At graduation, Marcus was named valedictorian, not just because of his grades, but because of his impact on the school community. In his speech, he talked about the importance of using whatever power or privilege you have to protect those who are vulnerable. We all have different kinds of strength, he told the crowd of students, parents, and faculty. Some of us are physically strong, some are socially confident, some are academically gifted, and some have technical skills. But none of those strengths matter unless we use them to make the world a little bit better for everyone. In the audience, Blake sat with his parents, listening intently. He had managed to graduate despite his academic probation, though his college plans had changed significantly. Instead of Stanford, he was going to community college and planned to study social work. It wasn't the future he had originally envisioned, but it was one where he could actually make a positive difference. After the ceremony, Marcus was surrounded by classmates wanting to take photos and say goodbye. As the crowd thinned, Blake approached him one last time. "I know we'll probably never be friends," Blake said, "but I want you to know that you changed my life. I'm not the same person I was a year ago." Marcus looked at Blake carefully. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something more genuine. That's all any of us can ask for, the chance to become better than we were. Blake smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had ever seen from him. "Good luck at MIT. You're going to do incredible things." "Thanks," Marcus replied. "Good luck to you too." As Marcus drove home with his parents that night, his mother asked him if he was proud of how everything had turned out. Marcus thought about the question. He was proud of standing up for himself.